The morning came in gold and silence, the kind that wealthy men mistake for peace. Adrian Okafor stood on the balcony of his Ikoyi mansion, a cup of black coffee steaming in his hand, his eyes sweeping over the manicured lawns that stretched like green velvet toward the gate. The air smelled of fresh jasmine and money, two fragrances that had always brought him comfort. Today was supposed to be flawless. In 3 hours, he would sign a merger worth 8 billion naira, the kind of deal that would cement his name in the Forbes Africa list permanently. His phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from investors who already considered it done. Adrian allowed himself a rare smile. Control, precision, legacy. These were the pillars of his world. Then the intercom crackled. "Sir, there's a woman at the gate." His security guard's voice carried hesitation, the kind that makes a man's instincts sharpen. "She says she needs to see you. She has a baby with her." Adrian frowned. "Tell her I don't take unscheduled visitors. If she's selling something, direct her to my assistant's office." A pause. Then the guard's voice returned, quieter, almost uneasy. "Sir, she's not leaving. She says you know her, and that you must marry her." The coffee cup froze halfway to Adrian's lips. The world didn't stop, it tilted. Marry her. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire he thought he'd extinguished months ago. He set the cup down slowly, his jaw tightening, his mind already racing through possibilities, through faces, through nights he had deliberately chosen to forget. "Send her away," he said, his voice flat, controlled. "Now." But the intercom crackled again. This time, it wasn't the guard. It was her. Adrian. The voice was soft, but it cut through the static like a blade. "If you don't open this gate, I will stand here until every neighbor, every journalist, every person walking past knows why I came. I will tell them about the night you got me pregnant. I will tell them about the baby girl you've never even asked about. And I will tell them that Adrian Okafor, the man who preaches integrity in every interview, is a coward who runs from his own blood." Silence. Adrian's hand gripped the edge of the balcony railing, his knuckles whitening. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears, louder than the birds, louder than the distant hum of Lagos traffic. He didn't remember her name at first, only the blurred edges of a night drenched in whiskey and grief. A night when his ex-fiancée had shattered his heart, when he'd stumbled into a bar in Lekki, when a woman with sad eyes and a kind smile had sat beside him. They hadn't exchanged last names. They hadn't exchanged promises. They had exchanged loneliness, and he had left before dawn, convinced it was a chapter he could close. But chapters have consequences. "Let her in," Adrian said finally, his voice cold as steel. He didn't wait for the guard's response. He turned and walked back into his bedroom, his mind already constructing walls, strategies, denials. He would offer her money. He would offer her silence. He would offer her anything except what she came for. 10 minutes later, she stood in his living room. Kamsi. That was her name. It came back to him now like a ghost stepping out of fog. She wore a faded yellow dress that had seen too many washes, her hair pulled back in a simple bun, her face bare of makeup. In her arms, wrapped in a worn pink blanket, was a baby, a tiny girl with soft curls and skin the color of honey kissed by the sun. The child was sleeping, her small fists curled against her mother's chest. Kamsi's eyes, swollen and red-rimmed, locked onto Adrian's with a ferocity that made him take a step back. She didn't greet him. She didn't apologize for the intrusion. She simply stood there, trembling, not with fear, but with fury held barely in check. "You don't remember me, do you?" Her voice was steady, but beneath it was a river of pain. "You don't remember the woman you used to forget your own heartbreak. You don't remember the promises you whispered when you were too drunk to stand. You don't remember telling me I was beautiful, that I deserved better, that the world was cruel to women like us." She laughed bitterly, a sound that cracked in the middle. "But I remember, Adrian. I remember every word. And I remember waking up alone, with nothing but the smell of your cologne on my skin and the sinking feeling that I had made the worst mistake of my life." Adrian opened his mouth, but no words came. His lawyer's instinct screamed at him to deny, to deflect, to demand proof. But something in her eyes, something raw and unbreakable, held him silent. "This is Adana," Kamsi continued, shifting the baby slightly in her arms. "Your daughter. She has your eyes. She has your stubborn chin. And she has a father who pretends she doesn't exist. She took a step closer, and Adrian saw the exhaustion etched into her face, the kind that comes from months of sleepless nights and unanswered questions. I didn't come here to ruin you, Adrian. I came here because I have no choice. My family threw me out. My friends abandoned me. The church I grew up in called me a disgrace. I've been living in a single room in Ajigunal, selling sachet water just to buy formula. And every night, I look at this baby and wonder what kind of mother brings a child into the world with no father, no future, no hope. Her voice broke, and for the first time, tears spilled down her cheeks. But she didn't wipe them away. She let them fall, let them bear witness. So yes, Adrian, you must marry me. Not because I love you, not because I want your money, but because this child deserves a name. She deserves a father who doesn't hide. And you need to stop running from the consequences of your choices. The room fell into a silence so thick it was suffocating. Adrian stared at her, at the baby, at the wreckage of a night he had tried to bury. And for the first time in years, the man who controlled boardrooms, who commanded empires, who bent the world to his will, felt completely, utterly powerless. If this already grips your heart, hit like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts below. It means more than you know. The night it happened, Adrian had been a different man, or perhaps he had been the same man stripped of his armor. It was 6 months before Kamsi showed up at his gate, on an evening when the rain fell like judgment over Lagos, washing the streets clean while leaving hearts filthy with unresolved pain. Adrian sat alone in a dimly lit bar in Lekki Phase 1, the kind of establishment where wealthy men went to hide from their failures. His third glass of whiskey sat half empty before him, the amber liquid catching the low light like trapped fire. He had just come from his ex-fiancée's apartment, where Nadia had returned his ring with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and words that cut deeper than any knife. You're married to your work, Adrian. I need a man, not a monument. The words replayed in his head like a broken record, each repetition scraping against his pride. He had given her everything: penthouse views, European vacations, a future most women dreamed of. But apparently, it wasn't enough. He wasn't enough. The whiskey burned going down, but not enough to kill the hollow ache spreading through his chest. He signaled the bartender for another pour, not caring that his driver was waiting outside, not caring that tomorrow he had a 7 a.m. meeting with German investors. Tonight, Adrian Okafor, the untouchable business mogul, just wanted to forget he was human. That's when she walked in. Kamsi hadn't planned to be there. She had been walking home from her evening shift at a pharmacy in Victoria Island, her feet aching in cheap shoes, her mind heavy with worries about rent and her ailing mother's hospital bills. The rain had started suddenly, the kind of downpour that turns Lagos streets into rivers within minutes. She ducked into the first shelter she saw, not realizing it was a bar until she was already inside, dripping water onto polished floors that probably cost more than her yearly salary. She felt out of place immediately, her simple blouse and worn skirt a stark contrast to the leather chairs and soft jazz bleeding from hidden speakers. She was about to leave when the bartender, a kind-faced older man, waved her over. Sister, you fit wait here till the rain stop. Make I bring you something warm. She hesitated, calculating the cost in her head, but the exhaustion won. Just hot tea, please. Nothing expensive. She sat at the far end of the bar, as far from the well-dressed patrons as possible, wringing water from her braids. That's when she noticed him. A man in an expensive suit jacket thrown carelessly over the back of his chair, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his face buried in his hands like he was trying to hold himself together. Even in his brokenness, he radiated the kind of presence that made people look twice. She recognized pain when she saw it. She had carried enough of her own. Adrian felt her gaze before he saw her. He looked up, his vision slightly blurred from alcohol, and their eyes met. Hers were soft, without judgment, without expectation, just a quiet understanding that passed between two strangers drowning in separate storms. He didn't know why he spoke. Perhaps the whiskey had loosened his tongue, or perhaps loneliness had finally broken through his carefully constructed walls. Do you ever feel like nothing you do is ever enough? His voice was rough, unfamiliar to his own ears. Kamsi blinked, surprised he was addressing her. She glanced around, confirming he meant her, then offered a sad smile. Every single day, something about her honesty, raw and unpolished, made Adrian laugh, a bitter sound that held no joy. Then we're both cursed. Or maybe we're both human, she replied softly, wrapping her hands around the cup of tea the bartender placed before her. I think the curse is believing we're supposed to be anything else. They talked, not about names or professions or the details that usually define strangers. They talked about disappointment and pressure and the suffocating weight of other people's expectations. Adrian told her about a woman who loved the idea of him, but not the reality. Kamsi told him about a family that measured her worth in marriage proposals and grandchildren. The bar emptied around them. The rain continued its relentless drumming against the windows. And somewhere between the third hour and the fourth drink, the space between them shrank. She should have left. She knew that. Every rational part of her brain screamed at her to call a taxi, to go home, to not mistake temporary connection for something real. But when Adrian's hand brushed hers on the bar counter, when he looked at her with eyes that saw past her worn clothes and tired face, when he whispered, "You're the first person in months who's made me feel like I'm not alone," she stayed. The hotel room was a blur. Adrian barely remembered checking in, barely remembered the elevator ride up, barely remembered anything except the desperate need to feel something other than emptiness. Kamsi told herself it was just one night, one moment of weakness, one attempt to feel wanted in a world that had made her feel invisible. They clung to each other like shipwreck survivors, seeking warmth in the wreckage. There were no promises exchanged, no phone numbers, no conversations about tomorrow. Just two broken people trying to forget their pain in the temporary comfort of skin and shared breath. When Kamsi woke the next morning, the bed beside her was empty. Adrian had left before dawn, his side of the bed already cold, nothing remaining except the faint smell of his cologne and a few naira notes on the nightstand. Money she refused to touch, money that felt like payment for something she had given freely. She gathered her clothes with shaking hands, dressed quickly, and left the hotel room feeling like she'd left a piece of herself behind. She told herself she would forget him. She told herself it meant nothing. She told herself she would move on. But the body has a memory that the mind cannot erase. 6 weeks later, when her period didn't come, Kamsi knew. She took 3 pregnancy tests in the bathroom of the pharmacy where she worked, each one confirming what her body already whispered. She was carrying the child of a man whose full name she didn't know, whose face she could barely recall through the haze of that night, whose absence had already taught her that some moments, no matter how tender, were never meant to last. She tried to find him. She went back to the bar, asked the bartender, described the expensive suit and the broken eyes. The man shook his head. "Sister, plenty big men dey come here. If he no leave name or number, he go hard to find am." She searched social media with the fragments she remembered, his first name, his vague mentions of business deals, his Lekki address. Nothing. It was as if he had been a dream, except the pregnancy test in her bag was devastatingly real. Her family's reaction was swift and brutal. Her mother, a devout churchwoman, wept as if attending a funeral. Her father, a retired civil servant with pride as rigid as iron, called her a disgrace and told her to leave his house. Her sisters, both married with children, looked at her with a mixture of pity and superiority, grateful it wasn't them. The church she had attended since childhood whispered about her during service, their eyes following her like accusations. Auntie Nkechi, the neighborhood gossip, made sure everyone knew that Kamsi the pharmacist donned carry bell for stranger. She moved to Ajagunal, into a single room with peeling paint and a shared bathroom, surviving on the mercy of a cousin who pitied her enough to help. She worked until her belly made it impossible, saved every kobo, and prepared to bring a child into a world that had already decided she was a failure. But every night, as she lay on a thin mattress feeling the baby kick inside her, Kamsi made a promise. "I will find your father. I will make sure you have a name. I will make sure you are not a secret he buries." And when Adana was born, with curious eyes and a stubborn cry, Kamsi knew exactly what she had to do. The day Kamsi's father threw her out, the sun was setting over their compound in Suralere, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, colors that should have been beautiful but instead felt like the world was on fire. She stood in the dusty yard, a small bag clutched in her trembling hands, while her father's voice boomed from the veranda like thunder from an angry god. Pastor Gabriel Okonkwo was a man who had spent 40 years building a reputation as a pillar of righteousness in their community. He led morning prayers at the local parish, counseled young couples on the sanctity of marriage, and preached about purity with the fervor of someone who believed heaven kept a ledger of human failures. Now, his own daughter had become the stain he could not wash away. "You have brought shame upon this house." His finger pointed at her like a weapon, his face contorted with a mixture of rage and something that looked disturbingly close to disgust. "I raised you in the fear of God. I sent you to good schools. I made sure you had opportunities one never had. And this is how you repay me? By opening your legs for a stranger and coming back with a bastard in your belly." Kamsi's mother stood behind him, her wrapper clutched around her waist, tears streaming down her face, but her mouth sealed shut. She had tried to defend her daughter earlier, in the privacy of their bedroom, whispering about mercy and forgiveness. But when her husband's anger turned toward her, questioning what kind of mother raised such a disgraceful child, she had retreated into silence. It was easier to sacrifice one daughter than to challenge a husband whose pride was his religion. "Papa, please." Kamsi's voice cracked, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach where the baby grew, a secret she had kept for 3 months until her body betrayed her. "I made a mistake. I know I did. But this child is innocent. Your grandchild is innocent." "Grandchild?" Her father laughed, a harsh sound that held no warmth. "That thing inside you is not my grandchild. It is evidence of your foolishness, your lack of self-control, your rebellion against everything I taught you. You want to keep it? Fine. But you will not do it under my roof. You will not bring that shame into this house where your sister's children play, where respectable people visit, where I have to look my neighbors in the eye." Kamsi's sisters watched from the doorway. Adiz and Kayamika, both married to men their father approved of, both mothers of legitimate children who carried their father's names proudly. Adiz, the older one, looked away when Kamsi's eyes found hers, as if eye contact might somehow transfer the disgrace. Kayamika at least had the decency to appear uncomfortable, her fingers twisting the edge of her blouse, but she said nothing. Speaking up would mean risking their father's wrath, and neither of them loved their younger sister enough to take that risk. "Please, Papa." Kamsi tried again, her voice breaking completely now, tears streaming down her face. "Where will I go? I have no money saved. I lost my job when they found out I was pregnant. I have nowhere. That is not my problem." Her father turned his back on her, the gesture more final than any words. "You should have thought about that before you disgraced yourself. Now leave. And do not come back until you have corrected this madness, either by getting rid of it or finding the man responsible and forcing him to marry you. Either way, you are not welcome here." The gate closed behind Kamsi with a clang that echoed through her bones. She stood on the street outside her childhood home, the bag containing a few clothes and her mother's secret contribution of 5,000 naira burning in her hand, and realized with stunning clarity that she was utterly alone. The neighbors peeked through their curtains, their faces a mixture of curiosity and judgment. Auntie Nkechi, who lived 3 houses down and whose mouth moved faster than light, was already on her phone, no doubt spreading the news to everyone in their church community. By tomorrow, the entire parish would know that Pastor Okonkwo's daughter had been thrown out for carrying a pregnancy out of wedlock. Kamsi walked. She didn't know where she was going, but her feet moved mechanically, carrying her away from the only home she had ever known. The sun completed its descent, and Lagos transformed into its nighttime self, streetlights flickering on, generators roaring to life, the smell of frying akara and suya mixing with exhaust fumes. She found herself at a bus stop, sitting on a wooden bench worn smooth by thousands of waiting bodies, and finally allowed herself to sob. Not quietly, not politely, but with the kind of grief that comes from being rejected by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. A hand touched her shoulder. Kamsi looked up to find her cousin Obioma standing there, a plastic bag of groceries in one hand, her face creased with concern. Obioma was 35, unmarried by choice rather than circumstance, and had always been the family rebel, the one who moved to Ajagunal to work with a women's cooperative, the one who argued with Uncle Gabriel about his harsh interpretations of scripture, the one who believed mercy mattered more than reputation. "I heard," Obioma said simply, sitting down beside her. The whole neighborhood heard. Your father's voice could wake the dead when he's angry. She set down her groceries and wrapped an arm around Kamsi's shaking shoulders. Come, you'll stay with me. It's not much, one room, shared bathroom, noise from morning till night, but it's shelter. And your family, regardless of what Uncle Gabriel says. That night, lying on a thin mattress on Obioma's floor in Ajigunal, Kamsi stared at the ceiling and listened to the sounds of poverty. Babies crying, couples arguing, generators coughing, gospel music blasting from a nearby church holding overnight vigil. This was her life now. Not the comfortable middle-class existence she had known, but survival in its rawest form. She placed both hands on her stomach, feeling the slight swell that had cost her everything, and whispered to the life growing inside her. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you're coming into this mess. But I promise you, I will find your father. Even if he doesn't want us, even if he tries to deny you, I will make sure you have a name. I will make sure you're not a secret buried in shame. The months that followed were the hardest of Kamsi's life. Her pregnancy progressed with complications. High blood pressure that required medication she could barely afford, swollen ankles that made walking painful, exhaustion that sank into her bones. Obioma worked long hours at the cooperative, so Kamsi was often alone, sitting in their cramped room, selling sachet water to neighbors for 20 naira each just to contribute to rent and food. The women in the compound were kind in their way. Mama Emeka brought her leftover soup. Sister Blessing gave her old maternity clothes. Auntie Gladys from upstairs prayed over her belly and rebuked the spirit of shame. But kindness couldn't fill the void left by her family's rejection. Kamsi's phone remained silent. No calls from her mother, no text from her sisters, no softening from her father. She saw Adiz once, at the market in Yaba, and tried to approach her. Her sister looked her directly in the face, then turned and walked the other way, pretending not to recognize her own blood. That moment hurt more than their father's shouting ever had. The church she had attended her whole life made it clear she was no longer welcome. When she tried to attend Sunday service during her 5th month, the women's leader pulled her aside after worship and suggested, with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, that perhaps Kamsi should find another congregation until her situation was resolved. The word hung in the air like a curse, situation, as if her baby was a problem to be solved rather than a life to be celebrated. Labor came on a rainy night in March, 3 weeks earlier than expected. Obioma rushed her to the general hospital in a Danfo bus, Kamsi gripping the seat in front of her as contractions ripped through her body like thunder. The hospital was overcrowded, understaffed, smelling of antiseptic and suffering. She labored for 14 hours in a ward she shared with 5 other women, some crying, some praying, some screaming as their bodies did the ancient work of bringing life into the world. When Adana finally emerged, small but perfect, with a head full of soft curls and eyes that seemed to look straight into Kamsi's soul, everything changed. The pain vanished, replaced by a love so fierce it terrified her. She held her daughter against her chest, this tiny human who had cost her everything but was somehow worth it all, and made a decision that had been forming since the day she was thrown out. She would find Adrian. She would demand he take responsibility. Not because she loved him, she barely knew him. Not because she wanted his money, though God knew she needed it. But because this beautiful child deserved more than a mother living in a room in Ajigunal, more than being called a bastard, more than growing up as evidence of shame. Adana deserved a father. And Adrian Okafor, whoever he was, wherever he had been hiding, was about to learn that some consequences couldn't be outrun. Adrian stood frozen in his living room, Kamsi's words still hanging in the air like smoke after an explosion. The baby, Adana, had begun to stir in her mother's arms, making soft mewling sounds that somehow pierced through the fog of his thoughts. He wanted to deny everything. He wanted to call security and have them both removed. He wanted to rewind time to that night 6 months ago and make the choice to go straight home instead of drowning in whiskey and loneliness. But the truth had a weight that couldn't be ignored, and it was standing 3 feet away from him, wrapped in a faded yellow dress and righteous fury. I need proof, Adrian heard himself say, his voice colder than he intended. A DNA test. You can't just walk into my home with a baby and expect me to. To what? Kamsi cut him off, her eyes flashing. To take responsibility for your actions? To acknowledge that you're not just a business mogul, but a man who makes mistakes like everyone else. She shifted Adana to her other hip, and the movement drew Adrian's gaze to the child's face. His stomach twisted. The baby had his mother's nose. The same delicate slope, the same small nostrils. It was a feature Adrian had inherited from his late mother, a feature that marked their bloodline like a signature. Before Adrian could respond, footsteps echoed from the staircase. His younger sister Zainab appeared, still in her nightgown, her braids wrapped in a silk scarf. She had been visiting from Abuja for the merger celebrations, staying in the guest wing. Her eyes widened when she saw Kamsi and the baby, and something flickered across her face. Recognition, perhaps, or the instinctive understanding that comes from witnessing a reckoning. Adrian, what's going on? Zainab's voice was careful, measured. At 28, she was the family diplomat, the one who smoothed over conflicts and kept secrets buried. But even she couldn't hide the shock when she looked at the baby's face and saw what Adrian was trying desperately not to see, the undeniable resemblance. It's nothing, Adrian said quickly. A misunderstanding. I'm handling it. A misunderstanding? Kamsi's laugh was bitter. Is that what you call your daughter? A misunderstanding? She turned to Zainab, and her voice softened slightly. I'm sorry to meet you like this. I'm Kamsi, and this is Adana, your niece. The word hung in the air like a verdict. Zainab's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes moving between Adrian and the baby with growing understanding. She took a step closer, her gaze fixed on Adana's face, and Adrian saw the moment his sister's doubt crumbled. Oh my God, Zainab whispered. She has Mama's nose. Adrian, she has Mama's nose. That doesn't prove anything, Adrian insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. He could feel the walls he'd built around this situation beginning to crack, could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders like concrete. Zainab turned to him, and for the first time in years, he saw anger in her eyes. Don't do this. Don't be like him. Like who? But Adrian already knew. The him Zainab referred to was their father, Chief Emeka Okafor, a man who had built a business empire while leaving a trail of abandoned women and unacknowledged children across Lagos. Adrian had spent his entire adult life trying to be different from the man who had broken their mother's heart repeatedly, who had died 5 years ago, leaving behind not just Adrian and Zainab, but at least 3 other children he'd never claimed, never supported, never acknowledged. I am nothing like him, Adrian said through clenched teeth. Then prove it, Zainab shot back. Don't make this woman and her baby invisible. Don't pretend they don't exist because it's inconvenient. Don't. Her voice broke, and she pressed a hand to her chest. Don't make me watch history repeat itself. The room fell silent except for Adana's soft cooing. Kamsi watched the exchange with tired eyes, and Adrian realized she had been bracing herself for this. For denial, for rejection, for the same pattern that had probably played out in her own family. She expected nothing from him, which somehow made her demand for marriage even more devastating. She wasn't asking because she believed in him. She was demanding because she had run out of options. Adrian's phone buzzed in his pocket, his assistant reminding him that the merger meeting was in 2 hours, that the investors were already gathering, that his carefully constructed day was waiting for him to step back into it. He could almost hear the walls calling him back, the empire beckoning him to forget this moment and return to what he knew, what he controlled. But Zainab's words echoed in his head. Don't be like him. Fine, Adrian said abruptly. We'll do the DNA test. But it takes time, at least a week for results. You can't just... I'll wait, Kamsi interrupted. But I'm not leaving. Not until this is settled. Not until my daughter has what she deserves. You can stay in the guest house, Zainab said before Adrian could protest. It's separate from the main house, private, comfortable. You and the baby will be safe there. She shot her brother a look that dared him to argue. And Adrian will make sure you have everything you need while we wait for the test results. Adrian wanted to object, wanted to maintain control, but he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. He nodded stiffly, pulled out his phone, and began making calls, to his doctor for a discreet DNA test, to his housekeeper to prepare the guest house, to his lawyer to discuss the legal implications. As he spoke in clipped, professional tones, organizing this crisis the way he organized business deals, he didn't notice Zainab leading Kamsi toward the back of the house, didn't hear his sister whispering comforting words to a woman she'd just met. Later that afternoon, after Kamsi and Adana were settled in the guest house and Adrian had postponed the merger meeting with a vague excuse about a family emergency, Zainab cornered him in his study. She placed an envelope on his desk, old, yellowed, sealed with wax that had cracked with age. "What is this?" Adrian asked, though something in his gut already knew. "Mama's letter," Zainab said quietly. "The one she made me promise to give you when you were ready. I didn't think you were ready 5 years ago when she died. I wasn't sure you were ready last year, or the year before. But now." She gestured toward the window that overlooked the guest house. "Now you need to read it." Adrian's hands trembled as he broke the seal. His mother, Chinanai Okafor, had died of cancer when he was 35, taking with her a lifetime of secrets and silent suffering. She had never spoken ill of their father, had never revealed the full extent of his betrayals, had maintained dignity even as he paraded his infidelity through Lagos society. Adrian unfolded the letter, and his mother's handwriting, elegant, careful, so painfully familiar, swam before his eyes. "My dear Adrian, if you're reading this, I am gone, and I pray you have become the man I raised you to be. But I fear I have done you a disservice by keeping silent about your father's sins. I thought protecting you from the truth would make you stronger, but silence has a way of becoming poison in the bloodstream. Your father abandoned more than just other women's children. He abandoned pieces of himself, his integrity, his responsibility, his humanity. And in doing so, he created a legacy of pain that rippled through dozens of lives. I stayed because I believed marriage was sacred, because I thought love could change him, because leaving felt like admitting defeat. But Adrian, my son, staying in silence was its own defeat. I should have spoken. I should have demanded he acknowledge every child he brought into this world. I should have taught you that real strength isn't in building empires. It's in facing the consequences of your choices with courage and grace. Do not repeat his mistakes. Do not let pride or fear or the illusion of control make you turn away from your responsibilities. And if a woman ever comes to you with a child bearing your blood, do not ask her to prove her pain. Believe her. Help her. Be the father your own father refused to be. The Okafor curse is not in our blood, it's in our choices. Break it, my son. Break it before it breaks you. With all my love, Mama. Adrian's vision blurred as tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed for 5 years finally broke through. The letter shook in his hands, each word a knife cutting through the armor he'd built around his heart. His mother had known. She had seen the pattern forming in him. The workaholism, the emotional distance, the way he treated relationships as transactions. She had tried to warn him from beyond the grave, and he had been too blind to see it until a woman in a yellow dress stood in his living room demanding he face himself. He looked out the window at the guest house, where a light had just come on. Inside, Kamsi was probably feeding Adana, singing softly, doing the work of 2 parents while he sat in his mansion wrestling with ego and fear. His phone buzzed again. Investors asking about the postponed meeting, business partners concerned about the delay. The empire was waiting, as it always waited, patient and demanding. But for the first time in his life, Adrian Okafor realized the empire could wait. Some things, some people, were more important than deals and mergers and the relentless accumulation of wealth and power. His mother had learned that truth too late. He still had time to get it right. Adrian stood, folded the letter carefully, and placed it in his pocket over his heart. Then he walked out of his study, across the manicured lawn, toward the guest house where his past had caught up with him and his future waited to be written. The DNA test took 3 days to arrange and another 4 for the results. 7 days that stretched like years, 7 days during which Adrian's carefully controlled world began to fracture in ways he couldn't contain. The test itself had been simple. A cheek swab from Adana, a blood sample from Adrian, clinical and sterile in a private laboratory where discretion was guaranteed with the kind of money only men like Adrian could afford. But discretion, Adrian was learning, was a luxury that depended on everyone's cooperation. And Kamsi was done cooperating with systems designed to keep her silent. She stayed in the guest house as Zainab had promised, but she didn't hide. Every morning, she walked Adana in a stroller along the mansion's grounds, visible to the gardeners, the security guards, the delivery drivers who came and went. She didn't announce who she was, but she didn't deny it either when people asked. Within 2 days, the household staff knew everything. Within 3, the story had leaked beyond the gates. By day 4, A gossip blog that specialized in exposing the secrets of Lagos elite published a blind item that everyone in their social circle immediately understood. Which billionaire bachelor known for preaching family values is hiding a baby mama in his guest house? Sources say she showed up with receipts, and he's scrambling to do damage control. The DNA test results aren't even back yet, but those who've seen the baby say the resemblance is unmistakable. Looks like another powerful man is about to learn that consequences don't care about your net worth. Adrian's phone exploded. Calls from his publicist, his lawyer, his business partners, investors in the merger deal that was supposed to close this week. Everyone wanted answers, explanations, assurances that this wouldn't affect his reputation or their investments. His publicist, a sharp-tongued woman named Yatund who had built her career on making scandals disappear, came to the house with a strategy she'd clearly used before. "We deny everything until the results come back," Yatund said, pacing his living room in her designer heels, her tablet open to the offending blog post. "If the test is negative, we sue for defamation. If it's positive, and Adrian, I need you to be honest with me. If it's positive, we offer her a settlement. Generous, but with an ironclad NDA. She signs, she stays quiet, and we control the narrative. We say you're taking responsibility privately, that you're supporting the child financially, but that marriage is off the table. We position you as a man who made a mistake, but is handling it maturely and discreetly." Adrian sat behind his desk, his mother's letter still in his pocket like a weight against his chest. "And if she won't sign?" Yatund's smile was cold, professional. "Everyone signs eventually, Adrian. It's just a matter of finding the right price. She's living in Ajagunal, selling sachet water. A woman in her position doesn't turn down life-changing money because of pride." But Yatund hadn't met Kamsi, hadn't seen the fire in her eyes when she said, "You must marry me." Hadn't understood that some demands aren't about money. They're about dignity, about a child's future, about refusing to let powerful men erase you because it's convenient. The DNA results came back on the 7th day, delivered by courier in a sealed envelope. Adrian stood in his study holding the envelope, Zainab beside him, both of them silent. He already knew what it would say, had known since the moment he saw Adana's face, his mother's nose, the undeniable truth written in genetics and blood. But reading it made it official, made it real, made it impossible to hide behind doubt or denial. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. The words blurred on the page. Zainab placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezed gently. "What are you going to do?" Adrian didn't answer immediately. He walked to the window, looked out at the guest house where Kamsi was probably feeding Adana lunch, unaware that the results had arrived. He thought about his mother's letter. He thought about his father's legacy of abandoned children and broken women. He thought about the merger deal, the investors waiting, the empire that demanded his attention. And then he thought about something his mother had written. Real strength isn't in building empires. It's in facing the consequences of your choices with courage and grace. "I'm going to do the right thing," Adrian said finally, his voice quiet but certain. "I'm going to acknowledge her. Publicly. I'm going to support Kamsi and Adana, and I'm going to," he paused, the next words catching in his throat. "I'm going to seriously consider what Kamsi asked for. Marriage. Not because she's forcing me, but because it might be the only way to give Adana what she deserves." Zainab exhaled, relief washing over her face. "I'll support whatever you decide. But Adrian, you need to talk to her first. Not through lawyers or publicists. Just you and her. Have an honest conversation." But before Adrian could cross the lawn to the guest house, before he could show Kamsi the results and begin that conversation, his phone rang. It was Biodon, his head of security, and his voice carried an urgency that made Adrian's stomach drop. "Sir, you need to turn on the television. Now." NTA News. Adrian grabbed the remote, and the screen flickered to life. What he saw made his blood run cold. Kamsi stood in front of his office building in Victoria Island, Adana strapped to her back in a wrapper, facing a crowd of reporters with cameras and microphones. Behind her, several women held signs. "Acknowledge your children. Rich men. Poor responsibility. Adana deserves a father." It wasn't just Kamsi. She had brought allies, a small but vocal group from a women's rights organization, and they had chosen his biggest business day to make their stand. "My name is Kamsi Okonkwo," she was saying, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "And this is Adana, the daughter of Adrian Okafor. 7 months ago, I met him on the worst night of both our lives. We were both broken, both lonely, both human. What happened between us wasn't planned, but this baby, she gestured to Adana on her back. This baby is real. She exists. And she deserves more than being a secret her father hides to protect his reputation. A reporter shouted a question. Ms. Okonkwo, are you asking for child support? I'm asking for acknowledgement, Kamsi replied, her eyes blazing. I'm asking Adrian Okafor to be a father, not just a wallet. I'm asking him to give his daughter a name, a family, a place in his life. I came to him privately. I asked him to do the right thing. And instead of listening, he ordered DNA tests and sent lawyers. So now I'm here, publicly, because maybe shame is the only language powerful men understand. Another reporter. Some people are calling you a gold digger trying to trap a rich man. What do you say to that? Kamsi's laugh was bitter. If I wanted money, I would have taken the settlement his publicist offered me 3 days ago. I didn't. I don't want to be paid to disappear. I want my daughter to grow up knowing her father chose to be present, not because a court forced him, but because he decided she was worth it. The camera zoomed in on Adana's face, and even through the television screen, the resemblance was undeniable. The reporters saw it. The viewers saw it. And inside the office building behind Kamsi, Adrian's business partners and investors were undoubtedly seeing it too. Adrian's phone began ringing incessantly. His publicist, his lawyer, his business partners, all demanding to know why this woman was outside his building, why she had turned a private matter into a public spectacle, why he hadn't controlled the situation before it exploded. But Adrian barely heard them. He was watching Kamsi on the screen, seeing her vulnerability and strength braided together, understanding with sudden clarity that she hadn't come to his gate that first morning to destroy him. She had come because she was drowning and needed him to throw a rope. And instead, he had thrown money. Get the car, Adrian said abruptly to Biodan. I'm going to Victoria Island. Sir, I don't think that's wise, Zainab interjected. Let the lawyers handle. No more lawyers, Adrian interrupted, his voice firm. No more publicists or strategies or damage control. I'm going to face this. I'm going to face her. 20 minutes later, Adrian's car pulled up in front of his office building. The crowd of reporters and onlookers had grown, drawn by the spectacle of a woman brave enough to confront a billionaire on his own territory. When Adrian stepped out of the car, cameras swiveled toward him like predators scenting blood. The questions came in a flood. Mr. Okafor, is that your baby? Are you going to take a paternity test? What do you have to say about these allegations? But Adrian's eyes were fixed on Kamsi. She stood frozen, Adana on her back, her expression shifting from defiance to uncertainty as he walked directly toward her. The crowd fell silent, sensing this moment was bigger than scandal, bigger than gossip. This was a reckoning. Adrian stopped 3 feet from Kamsi, close enough to see the exhaustion carved into her face, the trembling in her hands, the fear she was hiding beneath her boldness. He pulled the DNA results from his pocket and held them up for everyone to see. Her name is Adana, Adrian said, his voice cutting through the silence. And she is my daughter. The DNA test confirmed it this morning. 99.99% probability of paternity. He paused, swallowed hard, and looked directly into Kamsi's eyes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I made you come here. I'm sorry I treated you like a problem instead of the mother of my child. I'm sorry I was too afraid of what this would cost me to see what it was costing you. Cameras clicked furiously. Reporters scribbled notes. But Adrian only saw Kamsi, tears streaming down her face, her shoulders finally dropping as if she'd been carrying a mountain and someone had just offered to help. I don't know if marriage is the answer, Adrian continued honestly. But I know Adana deserves a father who is present, who is proud of her, who doesn't hide her to protect his image. And I know you deserve better than what I gave you, which was nothing but silence and shame. He took a breath. So I'm asking, publicly, for a chance to do better. Not because you're forcing me, but because my daughter deserves it. And because you were brave enough to demand what I should have offered freely. The crowd erupted, some cheering, some jeering, reporters shouting questions that no one answered. But Kamsi simply nodded, adjusted Adana on her back, and whispered words only Adrian could hear. Don't make me regret giving you this chance. The weeks following Adrian's public acknowledgement unfolded like a storm slowly transforming into rain, still turbulent, still unpredictable, but carrying the promise of something clean and new. The video of his confession went viral within hours, shared across social media platforms with hashtags that range from supportive to skeptical. Hashtag Adrian Okafor Redemption trended alongside hashtag Kamsi Deserves Better, and Lagos society divided itself into camps. Those who believed powerful men could change, and those who saw his words as performance, damage control dressed up as accountability. But inside the walls of Adrian's mansion, away from cameras and commentary, something quieter was happening. Adrian moved Kamsi and Adana from the guest house into the main residence, giving them the entire east wing with rooms that overlooked the gardens. He hired a nanny to help Kamsi, not to replace her, but to give her rest she desperately needed. He watched, awkward and uncertain, as Kamsi showed him how to hold Adana properly, how to support her head, how to read the different cries that meant hunger versus tiredness versus simply wanting to be held. She likes it when you sing, Kamsi said one evening, finding Adrian pacing the nursery at 2 in the morning, Adana wailing in his arms. Even if you can't carry a tune, she just wants to hear your voice. Adrian, who had addressed rooms full of investors without hesitation, felt his throat close with nervousness. But he began humming, some old tune his mother used to sing, words he'd forgotten, but melody he carried in his bones. Adana's cries softened, her small fists uncurling, her eyes finding his face in the dim light. Something cracked open in Adrian's chest, something he didn't have words for. Love, perhaps, or the terrifying realization that this tiny human depended on him for everything, and no amount of money or business acumen could substitute for simply being present. Kamsi watched from the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. She had every reason to distrust him, every reason to believe this was temporary, that the novelty would wear off and Adrian would return to his empire, leaving her and Adana to occupy space in his life without truly being part of it. But she saw something in the way he held their daughter, gentle despite his inexperience, committed despite his fear, that made her think maybe, just maybe, redemption wasn't a performance. Maybe it was a choice he was making in small moments, in the middle of the night, when no cameras were watching. She's beautiful, Adrian whispered, still swaying gently. I didn't let myself see it before. I was so busy being afraid of what she represented that I didn't see who she actually is. And who is she? Kamsi asked softly. She's proof that something good can come from mistakes. That grace exists even when we don't deserve it. Adrian looked up, his eyes finding Kamsi's in the shadows. She's everything I didn't know I needed. The weeks turned into a month. Adrian restructured his work schedule, delegating responsibilities he'd once thought only he could handle, discovering that his company didn't collapse when he chose to leave the office at 5 to have dinner with Kamsi and Adana. The merger deal eventually closed, smaller than originally planned because some investors backed out after the scandal, but Adrian found he didn't mourn the lost millions the way he once would have. Numbers on a screen suddenly felt less important than Adana's first laugh, which happened on a Tuesday afternoon when he made funny faces during her diaper change. But the question of marriage still hung between them like smoke, acknowledged but not addressed. Kamsi had demanded it that first day, but now, living under the same roof, she found herself uncertain. She watched Adrian transform from the cold stranger who had dismissed her to an engaged father who read parenting books at midnight and called his sister with panicked questions about baby rashes. She saw him becoming someone worthy of Adana's love. But did that mean he was someone she could trust with her own heart? The moment everything changed came on a Saturday evening. Adrian's family lawyer, Mr. Okonkwo, no relation to Kamsi, just one of those coincidences Lagos specialized in, visited the house with documents regarding Adana's legal status, birth certificate amendments, trust fund establishment. Kamsi sat through the meeting feeling overwhelmed by legal language and financial figures that seemed unreal. When the lawyer left, Adrian found her on the balcony, staring out at the city lights blurring through her tears. "What's wrong?" Adrian asked, genuine concern replacing his usual professional distance. "Did something the lawyer said upset you?" Kamsi shook her head, wiped her eyes roughly. "It's not that. It's just," her voice broke. "I spent 7 months believing Adana would grow up like I did, struggling, invisible, carrying shame like a second skin. And now she has a trust fund worth more than my entire family will see in 3 generations. She has a father who reads to her every night. She has a name that means something in this city. Fresh tears spilled over. I should be happy. I am happy. But I also feel like I'm disappearing. Like I was just the vessel that brought her here, and now that you've acknowledged her, I'm just extras. Background. The woman who made a mistake with you. Adrian felt the words like a punch to the stomach. He had been so focused on being a good father to Adana that he hadn't considered what Kamsi needed, what she deserved beyond financial security and a roof over her head. He had treated their relationship like a business arrangement, civil, functional, but empty of real connection. You're not extras, Adrian said quietly, moving to stand beside her at the railing. You're the reason Adana exists. You're the one who carried her when I was nowhere to be found. You're the one who chose to keep her even when everyone told you to give up, to disappear, to protect my reputation at the cost of your dignity. He paused, gathering courage for words he'd never said to anyone. And Kamsi, you're the bravest person I've ever met. You walked into my gate with nothing but truth and determination, and you changed everything. Not just for Adana. For me. Kamsi turned to look at him, skepticism and hope warring in her eyes. Pretty words, Adrian. But words are easy for men like you. What are you actually offering me? Beyond money and a room in your house? What am I to you? It was the question Adrian had been avoiding, the one that required him to be vulnerable in ways business deals never demanded. He thought about his mother's letter, still kept in his desk drawer, words he read every night before bed. Do not let pride or fear or the illusion of control make you turn away from your responsibilities. But this wasn't about responsibility anymore. This was about choosing connection over safety, choosing to risk rejection for the possibility of something real. I'm offering you a partnership, Adrian said slowly. Not because you demanded marriage that first day, but because over the past month, I've watched you mother our daughter with a patience and creativity I didn't know existed. I've watched you bring warmth into this cold house. I've watched you forgive me a little more each day, even though I didn't deserve it. He took a breath. I'm offering you my respect, my commitment to being present, my promise that I will spend the rest of my life trying to be the man you and Adana deserve. And yes, if you're willing, I'm offering you marriage. Not as a transaction, not as damage control, but as a choice, my choice to build something real with you. Kamsi searched his face for deception, for the performance she'd seen so many times from men who spoke beautiful lies. But Adrian's eyes held steady, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen from him. The Mogul had been stripped away, leaving just a man asking for a chance he hadn't earned but was willing to work for. I don't love you, Kamsi said honestly. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. You hurt me, Adrian. You made me feel invisible. I know, Adrian acknowledged, not flinching from the truth. And I can't undo that. But I can promise that from this moment forward, you will never be invisible to me again. You will never be background. You will be my partner, Adana's mother, the woman I choose every day even when it's hard, even when we disagree, even when love feels impossible. Kamsi was quiet for a long moment, the Lagos night humming around them, generators, distant music, the eternal pulse of a city that never truly slept. Finally, she spoke. If we do this, if I say yes, I need you to understand something. I'm not marrying you to become Mrs. Adrian Okafor, billionaire's wife, ornament on your arm. I'm marrying you so Adana has a family. So she grows up seeing her parents choose each other, work through hard things, build something that matters more than money or status. That's all I want, Adrian said simply. To build something that matters. The wedding happened 2 months later, small and private in the mansion's gardens. No society photographers, no elaborate guest list. Just Zainab and Obioma as witnesses, a few close friends, and a pastor who spoke about grace and second chances. Kamsi wore a simple white dress Zainab helped her choose, her natural hair styled in elegant braids woven with white flowers. Adrian wore traditional attire his mother had commissioned for him years ago, clothing he'd never worn because there had been no ceremony worthy of it. Until now. When the pastor asked if they took each other as husband and wife, Kamsi looked into Adrian's eyes and saw not the man who had dismissed her, but the man who now woke at 3 in the morning to feed their daughter so Kamsi could sleep. She saw the man who was learning, slowly and imperfectly, to be present. And she said, I do. Adrian's voice shook when he repeated the words. Not from doubt, but from the weight of the promise, the magnitude of the chance he was being given. When he kissed his bride, it was gentle, tentative, the kiss of two people beginning a journey neither of them fully understood, but both were willing to walk. The reception was held under fairy lights strung through the garden trees, a small celebration that felt more like healing than festivity. Obioma gave a toast that made everyone cry, talking about the Kamsi she'd sheltered in Ajagunal, the woman who had lost everything but refused to lose herself. Zainab spoke about her brother's transformation, about watching him become the man their mother had believed he could be. And Adrian, surprising everyone, stood to speak without notes, his voice carrying across the garden. "I'm not going to stand here and pretend I deserve this," he began. "I don't. I didn't earn Kamsi's forgiveness or Adana's love. They were given to me as grace, undeserved but life-changing." He looked at his bride. "Kamsi, you demanded I marry you. But tonight, I'm choosing it. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us. And I promise, for whatever it's worth, that I will spend every day trying to be worthy of that choice." As the evening deepened, guests danced to soft music while Adana slept peacefully in her grandmother Obioma's arms. Adrian and Kamsi stood together at the edge of the celebration, watching their daughter's chest rise and fall, both of them thinking about how far they'd traveled from that night in a bar when two broken people had collided and accidentally created something beautiful. "What happens now?" Kamsi asked, her hand finding Adrian's. "Now we figure it out together," Adrian replied, squeezing her fingers gently. "One day at a time. One mistake at a time. One moment of grace at a time." And somewhere in the Lagos night, in the spaces between what was and what would be, love began its quiet work. Not perfect, not easy, but real and growing in the ashes of what had been burned away. Sometimes the greatest transformations begin with the courage to demand what you deserve, and the humility to accept consequences you tried to outrun. Kamsi's story reminds us that motherhood is fierce, that dignity cannot be bought with silence, and that even billionaires are just men who must answer for their choices. Adrian learned what his mother tried to teach him, that real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the relationships we honor and the promises we keep. This story whispers truth to every woman who has felt invisible, every child who deserved a father's presence, every person who believed redemption was impossible. It tells us that change is real when it's chosen daily in small moments, in midnight feedings, in public confessions, in the decision to build rather than abandon. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that courage and grace can transform even the most broken beginnings, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more true African stories that touch the soul. Your support helps us continue telling stories that matter, stories that heal, stories that remind us we're all worthy of love and second chances.